In this, a follow-up video to The Gear of MGS, we'll be taking more of a deep dive, but not an exhaustive one, into the gear specifically from MGS1. With enough views and support, I intend to cover gear from each game in turn. The torpedo-like vessel Snake uses at the start of MGS1 is an SDV, a Swimmer Delivery Vehicle. The SDV, employed by the Navy SEALs, is gear that goes back to the height of the Cold War and even World War II. As stealthy as submarines can be, they're too giant to get very close to shore undetected. And not even Navy SEALs can be expected to swim and scuba for miles and miles underwater prior to starting a mission. So the Navy turned to a prototype drafted by the British during World War II. It's actually this British model SDV with its room for only a single pilot that Snake's SDV resembles at the start of MGS1. Actual SDVs can carry, according to the webpage USS Nautilus, up to 6 operators actually. They run on lithium-ion batteries today. The SDV is only used by the most elite soldiers, as, quote, out of the approximately 2,600 active duty SEALs, only around 230 are qualified to operate or serve on SDV missions, end quote. This owes to the fact that, apart from it being freezing cold, all navigation has to occur underwater using only sonar and with zero naked eye visibility. One of the most iconic weapons seen in MGS1 is the SOCOM pistol. Crafted by German arms company Heckler & Koch, the Mark 23 Special Operations Command Pistol, SOCOM for short, is also called the Offensive Handgun Weapon System. The MGS1 version also includes the Laser Aiming Module, or LAM, and suppressor. The SOCOM, as MGS1 calls it, takes its name from the acronym for the U.S. Army Special Operations Command. Activated as a major joint outfit in 1987, U.S. SOCOM combines the Special Forces units, doctrines, and training regiments of the Army, Navy, and the Air Force all under one roof. It was in 1990, with the fall of the Soviet Union and rise in importance of regional special operations, that the Pentagon first contracted Heckler & Koch to create a replacement sidearm for their legendary Colt M1911A1 45. The SOCOM Mark 23, as seen in MGS1, would not be field operational until 1996, and it's still seen in the hands of Special Operations Forces, or SOFs, not only from the US but all over the world today. Perhaps just as iconic in MGS1 as the SOCOM 45 sidearm is Snake's assault rifle, the very unique-looking FAMAS. Maybe as a nod to NATO, while the SOCOM is German-made, the FAMAS is of French design, and yes, even fires NATO rounds. Short for Fusil d'assaut de la Manufacture d'Armes de Saint-Étienne, or assault rifle from the Saint-Étienne weapons factory. The FAMAS was created in the 60s and 70s as France's missing link between assault rifle and submachine gun. The FAMAS, adopted by the French Army in 1978, was one of the very first bullpup rifles, which accounts for its compact size and wider barrel compared to, say, the US Army's M4 carbine. Though still mainly associated with France, the FAMAS's presence in MGS1 likely stems from its use by coalition forces in 1991's Operation Desert Storm, and also by French-affiliated mercenaries and so-called private security forces all across former French colonies in Africa. After all, decolonization arguably led to the post-Cold War paradigm that MGS1 addresses of regional skirmishes, special operations, and private forces. Another memorable MGS1 weapon is of course the chaff grenade. Now here we come to a case of something taken from the real world that MGS makes more fun, and more appropriate for its game scenarios. Chaff was invented during World War II as a stealthy method for making an aircraft temporarily radar-proof. To quote from the Smithsonian, Chaff, or quote, a collection of a few hundred thin reflector strips, might conceal the exact location of a plane during a raid behind a large cloud of radar signal, or even appear to be a major attack when in reality there are only one or two planes, end quote. Originally referred to by the codename Window by the British, chaff particles are usually either aluminum, metallized glass, or plastic. They disrupt radar signals by dispersing through the air. Since World War II, the chaff technique has also become used to deflect radar-guided missile attacks, and even some nuclear warheads, if fired, will let off some radar-scrambling chaff. This only strengthens, of course, the idea of tactical advantage presented in MGS1 by the fictional Metal Gear Rex and its railgun-fired, radar-proof, undetectable warhead. Another example of an embellished piece of gear to be found in MGS1 is the Nikita missile launcher. As Kojima states in the 1998 official mission handbook for the game, quote, although in real life a larger version exists, there is no version as small as this one, end quote. The best I could find on specifics here was a patent that was filed in early 1997 by Hughes Aircraft Company for a, quote, missile system incorporating a targeting aid for man-in-the-loop missile controller, end quote. There are also many examples of remote-controlled missile artillery platforms that use GPS, like the M270D MLRS, or Multiple Launch Rocket System. This in some iteration was used back during the Gulf War, specifically to destroy Iraqi surface-to-air or SAM missile sites.
His job was to track down and destroy mobile Scud missile launching platforms. You were there too, I believe. Didn't you infiltrate Western Iraq with a platoon of Green Berets?
I was just a kid myself back then.
How about the security keycards Snake has to collect in order to access restricted areas in Shadow Moses, the PAN cards? In 1996, T.G. Zimmerman wrote a paper called Personal Area Networks, Near-Field Intra-Body Communication. Zimmerman wrote that it was inevitable for wearable or portable microelectronic devices to gain an ability to network together. His PAN theory works out a possible method of doing so by using the human body as the transmission medium for networking together digital information. Zimmerman mentions a completed PAN system prototype, which, quote, allows users to exchange electronic business cards by shaking hands, end quote.
Isn't there some kind of safety device to prevent this type of terrorism?
Another piece of real gear found in MGS1 is the so-called PAL system, or Permissive Action Link. To quote from Principles of Nuclear Weapons, Security, and Safety from 1997, the PAL is a sophisticated electronic lock that, quote, prevents arming the weapon unless the correct codes are inserted into it. There is a signal recognition system in the weapon that responds only to a single, very specific, complex signal, end quote. Originating in the 1960s, initially the PAL was an analog device. But, quote, a recent approach has been to provide this signal with digital communications and codes, end quote. This obviously raises the question of whether or not digital communications and codes aren't easier to falsify or get your hands on than an analog device.
You can get anything if you have enough money and the right connections.
We have the material that the PAL card in MGS1 is actually made of, shape memory alloy. Shape memory alloys are, to quote the journal Platinum Metals Revolution, quote, materials that can change their shape at specific temperatures. SMAs are used in applications as diverse as sensors, temperature-sensitive systems, force actuators, fire safety valves, and more, end quote. Of course, SMAs are nothing new for the series, given they also appeared in MGS1's predecessor, 1991's Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake. It turns out that the last two pieces of gear we'll be discussing here, the Soliton radar and stealth camouflage, have both over the years passed from fiction into fact, or at least come much closer to reality than they were in MGS1's era. The Soliton radar system, developed by Mei Ling in the game, uses off-the-shelf technology to detect enemy personnel indoors. As early as the year 2000, meanwhile, something already came into existence like this, called the Tactical Radar System. However, these systems were used by defensive security forces, not infiltrators like Snake, at least as far as I could find. See if this 2000-era report by Signal magazine about a British surveillance system sounds anything like the Soliton radar. Quote, "A man-portable sensor capable of detecting troops and vehicles up to 100 meters away. It consists of a microwave Doppler radar unit and a passive infrared sensor, which transmits a message to a sentry equipped with a pager display that indicates a target's type and its direction." End quote. Lastly, stealth or invisible camo is being rapidly pursued by militaries and private contractors to this very day. Though no prototype has been deployed in actual combat as far as I could find, many hyped up science articles have been written in recent years about gear like this, the so-called broadband invisibility cloak. It bends ultraviolet, shortwave, and standard infrared signals, as well as concealing things in the visible light spectrum. Well, that's it for now. Tune in next time as we explore more gear from the MGS series, as we focus on MGS2 Sons of Liberty. Until next time, boss.